We are very pleased tonight to welcome Adam Gray. Adam's running for Congress in California's 13th Congressional District. He was born and raised in Merced. He was working in his family's business from a young age. And Adam ran for the state assembly in 2012 and spent the next decade there working as a champion for the Central Valley. He's worked to form bipartisan consensus around key Valley concerns, including water rights, healthcare availability, and public safety. Adam ran for Congress in the newly formed California 13 district in 2022, losing narrowly by only 564 votes. That was, by the way, I think the second closest race in the entire country for the House congressional districts last year. Adam is back again to challenge the incumbent, John Duarte. Please join me in welcoming Adam Gray. Adam, over to you.
Well, good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, coming through loud and clear.
There we go. Well, appreciate the opportunity to visit with everyone this evening. My name's Adam Gray. I'm running for Congress in California's 13th Congressional District, a district that I live in today and grew up in. My family was in the dairy business. We basically built dairies and sold milking equipment to dairies. And that's what I grew up doing. We had a small old kind of family feed store and the dairy equipment company. And I started working there when I was, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but about 8 years old, and worked there up through college, and actually put myself through community college at home in Merced, and had an opportunity to go to UC Santa Barbara and get an education and get my degree in political science. And following my opportunities there, the state assembly member, a guy named Dennis Cardoza, who went on to serve in Congress later in life, gave me a job in our state capitol, working both in the Merced and Turlock offices as well as the state capitol office, and got my first experience with politics and public policy. And that led to what's been a almost 25-year career now, working at the state level and local level, and then most recently in 2022 running for Congress. I'm not the trendiest candidate in 2023, a time when it seems increasingly popular to be far right or far left. I've been very much a centrist, a deal maker, somebody who looks for consensus, and somebody who stands up for a region of California that often gets overlooked. You don't often hear people talk about California through the lens of farm country, right? People say, "Oh, you're from California, you must be from Hollywood or the Silicon Valley or San Diego or the beaches." And of course, I grew up in a part of California that's rural, that's full of small family farmers, and a part of the world that grows most of the food that this country eats, and much of the food that this world consumes. We have the most productive farming region in the world here in California, and I don't think that gets said enough. Too often people talk about Hollywood and the Silicon Valley and so many of the things that we've done here in California. The wine industry is probably the most popular agricultural product industry, but the reality is, whether it's almonds, pistachios, row crops, dairy, we produce much of the food that this country and the world eats, and we do the best farming in the world. And I've had the honor of representing a community that's engaged in that for the past decade. I got involved in politics thinking that my part of California needed a fair shake and to get some attention. Too often, when you go to Sacramento, I can imagine the same thing in DC, the productivity, the contribution that the folks that I grew up with made, that just frankly gets overlooked. And on my first day getting sworn in Sacramento, they go through the counties in alphabetical order. And when they name your county, you get to stand up and you're recognized on your first day in the legislature. And in my first day in the legislature, when they got to Merced County, I was the only member of the legislature that stood up and was recognized. And when they got to LA County, half the damn floor stood up and got recognized. And you kind of immediately see that while partisan politics is one component of public policy. Where you're from, what region you represent, and rural versus urban issues is another part of politics. And so I spent a decade in the legislature trying to put coalitions together and breed compromise and consensus to help move issues along that were important to our area. And let me give you a perfect example of an issue that just gets viewed differently in a rural community, and that's healthcare. While most of the debate in this country is centered around the ability to get healthcare coverage or insurance, be it a single payer system or the Affordable Care Act, the expansion of Medi-Cal here in California to reach communities. But if you don't have healthcare infrastructure in your community, and I mean clinics, nurses, doctors, then having an insurance card allows you to go to the same place you can go without an insurance card, which is the emergency room. And I spent the 10 years that I in the legislature fighting for access to healthcare, and how do we recruit more nurses and healthcare professionals and physicians into rural communities, and how do we take advantage of technology to bring more services in healthcare into rural communities. And in 10 years, we managed to accomplish a lot. Not only did we expand coverage through the expansion of the Affordable Care Act and making sure that every kid in the Central Valley had healthcare, but we worked to build a medical school in conjunction with UC Merced and UCSF and Fresno, in the hopes that we can take our best students in the Valley and certainly recruit students from all over California and the country to come to the Central Valley, get invested in the community, get their medical education, and start a residency and actually provide real healthcare to people that desperately need it. And those are the kind of nuances that exist when you represent a rural community, the kind of things that I've worked on over this past decade in the legislature. In 2022, the opportunity arose to run for Congress because of redistricting and because of where the incumbent members of Congress chose to run, Jim Costa in the Fresno area and Josh Harder moving north into the Stockton area. We were left with an open seat here in the northern San Joaquin Valley, California 13. And that seat was very similar to the assembly district that I had held for over a decade. And in fact, it was about 70% the same district. And after many conversations with folks in my community who encouraged me to run, I decided to step in and run for that seat. We ran a competitive primary. We beat our Democratic opponent 2-1, got into the general election in what was a Biden plus 14 district. So one that was, I think, viewed by many people to be a kind of a sure win. But those of us who have lived here in the San Joaquin Valley know that not only are our voters very moderate, purple is certainly the proper color to describe these districts, but more importantly, in non-presidential races, we have huge turnout issues. And we've seen that in the South Valley and the North Valley. And we saw that in 2022 in California 13. We had a 4% voter turnout. We had a very divisive Democratic primary, which is unfortunate because the gentleman who ran against me in the primary was never going to win the seat. He ran as a progressive Democrat, although he ran as a progressive Democrat who had never lived in the district, still doesn't live in the district. He was able to secure some out-of-district funding, spent a bunch of money beating me up as a Trumpocrat. And in the general election, we ended up losing a very tight, low turnout election by 564 votes, which was unfortunate to say the least, given the dynamics throughout the country. But it was hard to get attention on this seat. Again, it was a 14-point Dem seat. The Democrats were concerned that they were going to lose 30, 40, 50 seats across the country. So the focus was very much on incumbents and not on open seats. Put up, what I think was a wonderful campaign, communicating to the voters about the work that I had done as 10 years, a representative in the state legislature. But at the end of the day, came up just a few votes short. Looking into 2024, this is probably the best pickup opportunity in the country. I've been on the ballot every election for over a decade. 70% of the voters in this district have voted for me on more than one occasion. And frankly, I am somebody who comes from the district, who has relationships in the district, who knows the experience of rural California and the northern San Joaquin Valley, and who's going to do an honest job of representing these people. You know, John Duarte, the gentleman who beat me in this last race, is a big Republican donor. He was a big donor to people like Kevin McCarthy, Devin Nunes, and Jeff Denham, if any of you remember Congressman Denham. And he filed against me on the last day at the encouragement of then, Kevin McCarthy, our gentleman who was seeking to be speaker and was looking to put together as much support as he could. And McCarthy and his kind of dark money allies put $300,000 into Duarte's race in the primary, despite the fact that there were other Republicans, because they figured he was their best chance. He was a big Republican donor. There was an ability to self-finance his race, and that was a successful strategy. And while the Democrats spent our time fighting in the primary, the Republicans spent their time putting the best candidate forward. We got into a low turnout, tough general. Millions of dollars were spent on both sides, and we came up in the second closest race in the country, 564 votes short. Following that election, I did a little bit of soul searching about what I wanted to do. If I wanted to stay in politics, it had been several decades of serving the state. But as I watched the kind of cynical effort of the Republican Party to represent, our community and represent this country, and people like John Duarte, who are now running around calling themselves moderates, as if there's such thing as a moderate Republican in Washington, D.C. these days, and really misleading people, and doing it in the interest of maintaining Republican control of the House. I'm a proud Democrat. My values align with the Democratic Party values. But at the end of the day, in the 10 years I spent representing my community, I always put my community first. And if my party was wrong on an issue, I didn't hesitate to speak up and stand up for, my neighbors. John Duarte's not that guy. He is a like I said, cynical Republican through and through, MAGA-like representative who doesn't want to represent our community, just wants to help Republicans maintain control of the House. And frankly, after what we've seen this year with the Republican Party trying to run us off the fiscal cliff on more than one occasion, lowering our credit rating, and refusing to work on behalf of the American people in a cooperative and collaborative fashion, I decided to enter this race again, and I did that in August. Over the first 6 weeks of the campaign, we raised over $250,000, and since then, I think we've raised another $250,000. And we're continuing each and every day to work with communities, not just in the district, but throughout the state, throughout the country, who want to see change in Washington, D.C. We barely lost this race. And to give you an idea of how well our campaign performed in 2022, this is a seat where in every presidential election, Obama won this seat at 54% of the vote. Hillary Clinton would have won this seat at just under 54% of the vote. And Joe Biden won this seat with 54% of the vote. And in 2022, Gavin Newsom, who was the top of the ticket Democrat, got 45% of the vote as a result of this low turnout. I got 49.9% of the vote, outperformed the top of the ticket by over 4 points. And I know we can win this in 2024. If we get anywhere near a normal presidential turnout, we're going to win this seat. And I think we may win this seat by a good margin. There's almost 100,000 voters. In 2022, 136,000 people voted. In 2020, which was the last presidential, 252,000 people voted. So there's over 100,000 voters that were left on the table. We need the help of organizations like yourself and others to motivate people, bring the importance of this election to everyone's attention, and to put in the volunteer hours and the time to make sure we get those people out to vote. And if we do that, we're going to win this seat, and we can turn our attention to other seats that are going to be critical in taking back the House. And so with that, I appreciate all of you making time to spend with me this evening, and look forward to answering a few questions and getting to know all of you better. And I'm just gracious, or excuse me, grateful for your help and support and willingness to engage in the democratic process and engage in what I think is going to be a critical and important race for the state of the Congress going forward. So thank you so much, and look forward to chatting with all of you.
Adam, thank you so much. That's a great introduction, and I think you really broke down a lot of the issues that I think that we want to explore. Would love to go a little bit deeper on a few of the things that you said. But to start out with, can you tell us a little bit more about the district? What should, as activists, many of us live outside the district, but obviously want to focus our attention on trying to help as much as we can. What do we need to know? What's most salient about California 13?
Well, I think the most important thing to understand about California 13 is that last point I made about turnout, right? With a 40% turnout, 100,000 voters not showing up, that's really what this seat is. And in fact, I think what's probably curious to people is that in a midterm election, you could lose this by 564 votes. And if we all do our jobs right, and I put up my record, and we get the grassroots support to really educate voters and get people out, this is going to go from having been a close race to maybe a blowout for Democrats, right? And it's odd to really digest that. It's strange to think that it is so vastly different from one cycle to the next. But as someone who's worked in Democratic politics here in the Valley for 25 years, we've seen this over and over again in state assembly seats and state Senate seats, certainly in congressional seats. And that's why I think the efforts of your organization are just so critical to the outcome here. When we have the energy and we have the volunteer hours and the motivation, we win these seats. And unfortunately, it's hard to do that in midterms. It was particularly hard in 2022, where we were coming out of COVID. While Gavin Newsom is an extraordinarily, popular governor in many parts of California, he's not an extraordinarily popular governor where I live, and he doesn't campaign where I live. Right, his campaign wins their election in LA and San Francisco. They don't spend resources in Fresno, and Modesto and Stockton, and that's a hit to folks like myself who are running as Democrats down the ticket. So I just can't emphasize the importance, of GOTV, of kind of grassroots and volunteer organizations, and of course having the right environment on our side. And the right environment is a presidential election where people are paying attention.
Got it. And why that big a discrepancy between the term and presidential? I mean, you mentioned part of it's that you don't have the support of the governor. Are there other factors that cause folks to just kind of sit out?
I think the main factor is just there's not a lot of attention. Again, we've got 5 of the most expensive media markets in the country in California. And if you follow statewide races, they're no longer competitive in California, right? When Alex Padilla is running for U.S. Senate, he doesn't actually have to try, in a sense, right? As soon as they get to the Democratic primary, it's kind of a sure thing. And the Republicans haven't been able to mount, competitive statewide candidates for some time. And that just has a really big impact in areas like the Valley, where they're not spending the money, they're not drawing people's attention. I mean, there's a reason we advertise in campaigns, right? It's because it draws people's attention to what's going on. And when you don't have competitive top of the ticket stuff, and you're fighting for in a rural community where maybe the talking points of the National Democratic Party don't resonate with the same enthusiasm with the folks I represent. I'll tell you a story about right after my loss last year. I walked into the Itlo American Club, which is an Italian American club in Merced that's been around for years. And I grew up in that neighborhood, so I spent a lot of time there. And I walked in, and there's a guy named Richie who's the bartender there. And Richie's been tending bar at that club as long as I've been an adult and able to go into that bar. And Richie said, "Oh, I'm so disappointed you lost, Adam. And I voted for you." And I didn't think Richie was a Democrat. And I said, Richie, are you a Democrat? Because I didn't think you were a Democrat. He said, no. Or he said, yes, I am a Democrat. He goes, but you're the only Democrat I voted for in the last 20 years. And I tell you that story because there's a lot of people who are registered Democrats in the part of the world that I live in who would probably say that same thing, right? They registered Democrat. In a way, they identify with the Democratic Party of the 1960s and 70s, not with the Democratic Party of 2023. And while I'm able to gain the support of some of those folks, a lot of kind of the maybe the national Democratic talking points don't resonate with them. And that's what, when you're looking at a 14-point by district, it may seem like an easy district to win, and it's not, because a lot of those Democrats are maybe a little more Democrats of a different era, I guess is the best way to say it.
So the national talking points don't work very well there. What are the talking points for you that work best in district? What are the things that you really focus on that resonate?
Well, I think the thing that probably I'm best known for, in a sense, is that I've stood up against my own party on some big issues. The one that comes to mind is water, right? There's nothing more critical to a community, driven by agriculture than the availability and the affordability of water, right? And that's not a sexy issue in any other part of the state, or the country as it is here in the Valley. And when my own party has tried to take measures against the interest of agriculture and the community, I've had the courage to stand up, despite the fact that I'm a Democrat and agree with Democrats on 95% of the issues, and stand my ground, right? And I think people respect that. And I think I've earned a reputation of being an independent thinker and somebody who's going to always put, the value of the community ahead of the values of the political party, right? And in a way, while I acknowledge that's not the trendy thing in American politics today, I still think with a lot of voters that means a lot.
So it's the ability to I guess demonstrate integrity. Is that another way of putting it? That
Yeah.
that you're able to say, look, I'm here for you, and I'm going to make my choices based on what it is you're telling me you need, rather than whatever the prevailing winds are.
I think integrity is a great way to put it, right? Because I think that's what people maybe feel like's missing so often in our politics is they have a sense of they have a sense of cynicism, right? That people are just out there either to feather their own nest or do what's in their political party's interest so that they can continue to be promoted out of self-interest or something. I think when you differentiate yourself and say, no, I'm gonna do what's right for you and your family first and foremost, whatever the cost. And in my case, over my career, that cost was highly publicized because I was removed as a committee chairman. I was kicked off the water committee in Sacramento by my own party. There's things that give me credibility. That's not me saying I'm a moderate or that I'm independent or that I'm a stand up for you, but rather me having walked the walk. And after doing that for over a decade, that does stick in folks' minds, right? And gives you a sense, I think, of authenticity that gets you over the top in an area where maybe there's a lot of skepticism.
And so water was really that key issue, or one of the biggest issues for you. But you also said that you agree with the Democratic Party 95% of the time. So I'm assuming that there are some kind of key issues where you felt like it's really essential to be an independent, but you're still a Democrat, right? And even though, as you just said, a lot of folks may not identify with the Democratic Party. Are there other issues where you feel being a Democrat's really important? And that those resonate for your community as well, or help us understand kind of how that plays out.
Well, on most issues. In fact, in my third term in the assembly, I had a applied mathematics intern from UC Merced in my office, and I had him put together a report where I wanted him to compare and contrast my voting record with the then Speaker of the Assembly, a guy named Anthony Rendon from Los Angeles. And by any objective measure, Anthony Rendon is one of the most liberal members, of the party and in Sacramento. And when he came back with that report, I had voted with Speaker Rendon 95% of the time on issues, right? And there had been a few issues where I stood apart, right? And water was probably the most prolific amongst those. There was a little bit of a difference too on some of the gun issues, and I attribute that to coming from an area where hunting is a big part of the local culture, and there's kind of a different attitude about gun safety and gun control than there is other parts of the state. But on so many of the issues, and one that I think couldn't be more important in 2023 is protecting a woman's right to choose, and having putting our kind of civil liberties where they need to be, and having a government with integrity that'll stand up for individual rights. My district's a funny one in that we have more churches per capita than most districts, and there's certainly a conservative bent on issues, and that certainly plays a role in the discussion around choice and abortion as well. But I always described, rural communities, and particularly the one that I grew up in, as get off my lawn communities. And, people, what does that mean? What do you mean get off my lawn? Well, we expect respect for our individual rights, our families, and in a sense, the discussion around choice and abortion is about telling other people's wives and daughters and family members what they should be doing, right? Which is the get off my lawn moment and stay out of my business. But at the same time, we don't talk about those issues in the same cadence maybe that urban communities do, right? And in a sense, almost impolite to talk about some of those issues, but we have a strong sense of respect for each other and each other's families, and what my opponent's doing on that issue gets back to what I'm talking about, this kind of cynical approach to do anything to hold on to power. When asked in debates about this issue, he'll say, well, I'm a moderate on abortion, which I always find myself going, what in the hell does that mean? I'm a moderate. You're a moderate on people exercising their rights. I mean, I don't see how you're a moderate on that. And then his next, kind of clever move is to punt to, oh, well, the Supreme Court got it right. This is a states' rights, decision, as if we need to let each state decide the rights of individuals. Are we going to let states decide if, African Americans can go into restaurants? At what point? What ridiculous end are we taking that argument to, right? And so, there are core issues that I think the Democratic Party is just right on. And unfortunately, the modern Republican Party has run astray from, and lacks integrity, and is willing to say anything to win, right? And the one thing I can tell this group, and some of you may like it and some of you may not like it about me over time, but I won't say anything to win. I was recently quoted in the San Francisco Chronicle in a story saying that I don't play a centrist on TV. I'm actually a centrist. And I mean that. My heart and my head are in a certain place, and I will always be honest and straightforward about where I'm at on issues. And I'll also always be willing to listen, right? Because there's always more to learn on every issue. But this cynical approach of Republicans to take some big donor, enter him into a race in a district he doesn't live in. And I want to emphasize this point. I'm the only candidate currently running for California 13 that lives in this district. Phil Arbaio does not live in this district. And John Duarte, our incumbent congressman, does not live in this district. And while that isn't a requirement of the law, and while that may not be important to a lot of people, it is important to a lot of people that live here, right? I grew up in this district, born and raised, worked in this district my whole life. These are my friends and neighbors. And I think we deserve somebody who actually has lived the experience of this community and is willing to put this community not only before any political party, but before any other interest, because that's what's representative democracy is about. And that's what I've done for 10 years in the legislature. It's what I'll do if I'm elected this year to represent this congressional district.
That's great. On your website and in your conversation this evening, um, in speaking about the issues, you focus a lot on your accomplishments as a legislator, which makes complete sense. But Washington's a bit different, and there are different issues there. If elected, what are the issues that you're going to care about most in Congress on, coming on the national stage? What are the ones that mean the most to you, just as a congressman, but also for the sake of your district? What counts the most there?
Well, the story of my district revolves around the story of UC Merced. And, for almost a half a century, every representative, going back to a guy named Tony Coelho, who was our congressman in the 80s, and everybody since has really worked diligently to bring a research university into our region, right? And we did that not because we wanted to have a bright, shiny university here in the San Joaquin Valley, but rather that we wanted to give opportunity to the families and the young people that live here, and not just opportunity to get an education, but also the opportunities that arise around the investment like a research university. I mean, there's a reason, Silicon Valley is around Stanford and Berkeley. There's a reason, that those types of investments by the state pay dividends, into the private sector, which then pays dividends into, opportunities for real jobs that allow people to, raise their families with dignity and have healthcare and opportunities, to save and to make a better life for themselves and for their kids, right? And that's why we fought so hard to bring a university here to Central Valley. When I got in 2012, that university was well on its way. Although we need to clear some hurdles for its growth to get additional investment and take it from a 5,000 person university to a 25,000 person university, like many of the other UC campuses. And a critical component of that was also to fight for a medical school program. And that gets back to the issue I talked about earlier, where, here in the Central Valley, we just don't have enough doctors, nurses, NPs, and others to provide healthcare, right? And in order to do that, you need to educate people here locally, provide residency opportunities locally, and provide the economic investment, that UC Merced has brought. And so, for 10 years, I fought to get a medical school program started. I was told in 2012 that it was a dead idea and was never going to happen. I was told that by the governor's office. I was told that by the legislature. 10 years later, we're in the process of building a $250 million building that's going to house the initial medical school program. And the first crop of students who will be part of an 8-year program started this fall at UC Merced, right? Well, I'd like to carry that work on because there's a lot more to be done, right? We have to build a real teaching hospital, here in the community. It's going to take, tens of millions of dollars of additional investment to really get after that problem. And all these things are intertwined because you don't get businesses to relocate to create great jobs into communities that don't have doctors, right? And so it's all intertwined and important together. And I know at the federal level, the opportunity to increase residency programs, which have had a cap for decades, the opportunity to invest tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into the UC effort to grow that medical school opportunity and grow the campus in general are going to be at the top of my list. And frankly, to find some way to create sustainability for agriculture here in the San Joaquin Valley. I mean, again, we have the largest and best farming operations in the world right here in California. We don't talk about it enough and we don't protect it enough. And, we haven't made an investment in water storage of any significance in half a century. And in fact, in 2014, I was a co-author of the bipartisan water bond that put aside $3 billion. And it looks like with Governor Newsom's latest moves, we may be getting close to actually realizing a new reservoir north of Sacramento, which will contribute to, creating a sustainable, both sustainability for communities as well as sustainability for agriculture. But so much more needs to be done. And my whole life, people have fought this kind of false narrative about farmers versus fish. And, as somebody who grew up in agriculture, but is also a Democrat, I can empathize with both sides of the argument. But at the same time, we've got to step up and actually make investments that make sense, that are in the interest, of these communities and are realistic. And it can be done. I mean, in my last year in the legislature, I was able to get over $40 million put aside to do floodplain restoration in the valley. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, we have the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act now, which requires us to create sustainability on our pumping, right? So you just can't pump endless amounts of water out of the ground. But that, has huge impacts on the ag economy. And environmentalists tend to fight tooth and nail any additional above ground water storage, dams, to be more specific. And one of the things that's been just a missed opportunity is floodplain restoration, where we can actually identify places along the rivers where you've got, the aquifers primed for groundwater recharge. And then instead of trying to control flooding, with levees, which has limited success, because when water wants to contract and expand, it's going to contract and expand regardless of what levees we have in place. But by flooding certain areas and letting that water then seep into the ground and recharge our aquifers, we create a sustainable, option for farming going forward. And that's something we could do all over. But because we spend so much time in these kind of antiquated fights that don't, look at the latest innovations and opportunities, we end up accomplishing nothing. And that's where I feel like my role as a Democrat from a farming community can play a really positive role at the federal level to step in and help them make some of these key investments and take the partisanship. I mean, one of the things that bothered me, as somebody who grew up in agriculture, is that too often, the California's become a one-party state, and that's the Democratic Party, right? Every statewide office, the state Senate, the state assembly. And agriculture, in many respects, has become a one-party industry. And the problem is it's not the same party. And what's happening is we're taking this incredible industry that feeds the world, and we're not taking the steps and the actions to make that a sustainable industry going forward because of politics, because too many farmers are Republicans and too many people in charge are Democrats, and they're not willing to, put down the partisan warfare and actually think about what's in the interest of California and our future. And that's something that I think I could play a really critical role in DC, and I welcome the opportunity to do that.
So basically representing the farming community in the Democratic Party is part of what you're saying. Yeah. Adam, I want to shift it a little bit. As you know, we're focused on grassroots action. And I know, we've heard from various grassroots groups that they had a hard time connecting to your campaign last year, that some of them just didn't get a chance to, help as much as they wanted to. We're also very focused on grassroots groups that are in district and, wanting to support them from the outside as well. What are the groups that you're working with currently in district, and what can you tell us about your campaign working with the grassroots to, make back far more than the 564 votes this next time around?
Yeah, well, we're playing. I mean, obviously, you can imagine after a 564 vote loss, we have an emphasis in our thinking and in our campaign about grassroots activities, and we're working with all of our, central committees throughout the 5 counties and some of the Democrat club groups, trying to make sure people have the infrastructure, resources, and organization to be successful. And frankly, in the last campaign, the situation I described where attention was spread out throughout the country, this district was somewhat of an afterthought to many. And I had to fight my own party in the primary in a way that I never should have. Created a situation where I don't think we had the best communication going into the general with a variety of grassroots groups. And I think that's an issue that feels resolved to me. I mean, the Democratic leadership and key players in DC, as well here in California, have been in contact with my campaign since day one. I think everybody sees this as the most winnable seat in the country. And there feels like a real deep sense of camaraderie and collaboration. And we're certainly, sowing those seeds in our direct campaign as well. So got some great organizers on the campaign early, great communication with our district, with our local, Dem Club groups, and opportunities like this evening to connect with you all, and then continue to connect over and over and over and over again, making sure that we're providing you the information you need and the resources. And I think we're just going to be in an entirely different place, really positive attitudes across the board, and great collaboration. So that's an area that I think it's going to win this seat, right? I mean, arguably we're going to win this seat with presidential turnout and a strong record that I've had for 10 years. But I think if we really bear down and put the elbow grease, as my father would say, into this, and do the work, we're gonna win this campaign. We're gonna win this campaign big. So, and everyone on the call should know that my campaign stands ready to really engage with you in a meaningful way, and make sure you have everything you need to give as much help as you're willing to give.
That's fantastic to hear. Really, really encouraging. Um, you know, doing a little bit of research for this, I came across this statement, which was, "I'm committed to upholding my promise to put Valley families ahead of Washington party politics, dedicated to working with my colleagues, both Democratic and Republican, to find common sense solutions." That's actually John Duarte on his congressional webpage. He's talking about immigration. Makes him sound a lot like you, right? Bipartisan, willing to buck his party, working for the Valley. Yet he also voted for Mike Johnson for Speaker of the House. How do you differentiate him? Because you're describing him as somebody who's insincere, basically just voting the party line, which, I mean, the most important vote you're going to make is for whoever the Speaker of the House is, because that's going to control so many things. How do you manage to differentiate yourself and categorize him in a way that's clear enough for voters when he's trying to muddy the waters in that way?
Yeah, I mean, that's consistent with what I was talking about earlier. John clearly got the memo that he needs to moderate himself to attempt to win, a seat that is this strongly Democrat. And I'm going to be pointing to voters the obvious, which is I've walked the walk. Like, it's, I don't need to advertise the fact that I've been removed from committees. I've been punished by my party. I've done all those things. John Duarte hasn't walked anything, and he actually voted for Steve Scalise, for Jim Jordan, for this other idiot, Mike Johnson. And the one thing I can say to the folks on this call tonight, and again, some of you may not even like hearing this from me, there are members of my party that I wouldn't vote for Speaker. And I wouldn't be shy about not doing it. I don't think we need the most extreme elements of either party in charge of the body. I think we need to find ways to both vehemently disagree on issues that are important, but also collaborate and work in the interest of a country that we're all a part of, right? And John Duarte, on every key vote thus far, has stood with his party. And this kind of ridiculous immigration thing, where he made one vote against a border security bill that the right wing, crowd had put up. That they didn't need his vote on it, so him not voting for it didn't stop it. And it was never something that was going to pass in the first place for Democratic Senate either. So it was just this insincere opportunity to have a throwaway vote on one issue. And I guess at the end of the day, I trust the voters, and I think the voters are going to put my 10 years of actually demonstrating independence in a meaningful way up against a couple of talking points that the NRC and John Duarte came up with to try sound like a independent. And I'm going to call him on it every opportunity I get, and we're going to litigate my record against his. Right. And I'm confident that when voters, are made aware of the details of that case, that they're going to side with me. Because what I've done is authentic and sincere, and what he's doing is not. And, too often I think people dismiss voters as being maybe not uneducated, or, don't know enough, or, are easy to mislead. I believe in voters, and I think voters get it right most of the time. And I think this very insincere effort will become increasingly obvious to voters over time, because John's not going to do anything between now and the election to actually indicate real independence, because he's not really independent. And he's also not going to accomplish anything because we have a Congress that isn't interested in accomplishing anything. We have a Congress interested in tearing the country apart and disagreeing. And I'll take that playing field all day long because I was able to accomplish a lot, even when I did disagree with folks ranging from the far right to my own party. And yet in 10 years, we got a lot done, right? And John's not going to get anything done. And a couple of meaningless throwaway talking points aren't going to convince the people in this district that he's a sincere advocate for them.
So you're going to point to his actions and make that clear, the discrepancy between what he's saying and what he's actually doing.
I mean, I don't know how you, in good conscience, as a moderate, vote for Jim Jordan. It makes no. I don't think there's not. I mean, the first thing John Duarte said is, "I'm only voting for Kevin McCarthy." That was on a Monday. By Wednesday, he was voting for the Ku Klux Klan guy from Louisiana. And 2 days later, it was Jim Jordan. And 5 days after that, it's this clown, Mike Johnson, who's just as extreme as all the rest of them. Just nobody's had time to figure it out yet. I think these things, and people will scoff at this and say, oh, well, voters don't really care who voted for speaker. Yeah, that's true. They don't necessarily care about that. But voters will pick up the insincerity of John being willing to actually step up and buck his party in a meaningful way on big issues. And we're going to have the opportunity because this isn't the last time that the Republicans are going to try to drive us off the fiscal cliff. I mean, this latest ridiculous effort to punt the fiscal kind of deadlines. But eventually, we're going to have a real conversation about funding the government. Funding programs are serious. John's going to have to put up real votes. And when you put up real votes, it doesn't become just talk anymore, right? And we're going to point that out to voters. And with your help, we're going to talk to as many voters as we can between now and next November.
Fantastic. Adam, I think we're at time, but thank you so much for carving out the time to spend with us this evening, giving us a really good picture of yourself, but also kind of your plan for going forward in 2024. Really grateful to you, and we wish you the best of luck. I think you've got a lot of people on the call who are going to be very interested in this race. Let me put it that way.
Well, I appreciate all of you taking the time out of your busy lives to be part of something bigger. And we certainly have an opportunity here in California 13 to make a real difference. And I know with your help, we can do it. And you have my commitment that I'm going to work my tail off to do everything in my power, every resource that I've earned in these last 25 years to bear in this race. But I know I can't do it without you. So appreciate you taking the time to visit with me. And I look forward to many hours working together over the next year.